Kombat 2. This Game Boy port of MK2 actually plays surprisingly well, considering the hardware and the lack of buttons. Turok 3. Released in the stiff competition of the PS2's launch, and the release of The World Is Not Enough on the N64 and Medal of Honor Underground on the PS1. This Turok has a Half-Life inspired single player, split between two characters with different branching segments in each level, and a pretty decent bot deathmatch, making this the best game in the series.
Hurry, we can get up to the
Cold Winter. If GoldenEye and the PC cult classic Soldier of Fortune had a spy love child, it would look a lot like this grittier, darker storied shooter with slightly floaty controls and its inexplicable use of almost 2 megabytes on your 8 meg PS2 memory card being the only complaints in this otherwise completely underrated first-person shooter. Guardian Heroes, with its multi-plane environments, branching paths, RPG-style leveling system, 6-player fighting game mode, and storyline, Guardian Heroes proves that the Saturn didn't only have vastly superior 2D fighters when compared to the PS1, but also had, hands down, the best library of beat-em-ups in that entire generation of gaming. Food Fight. Perhaps best described as playing similar to Robotron, Food Fight sees players throwing food at chefs in order to eat an ice cream cone on the other side of the screen, and is a simple and yet addictive game. Ratchet and Clank Future, A Crack in Time. While 3D platformer fans are pretty much down to Ratchet and Mario, this second Ratchet game on the PS3 with its mixture of platformer, third-person shooter, RPG leveling, and humor, making for an incredibly addictive game that is hard to put down once you get into it, is a great showing that this once booming genre is far from dead. Draconus, Cult of the Wyrm? While I am not sure if this overlooked Dreamcast game is an official or unofficial sequel to the overlooked PC game, Die by the Sword, I can say that if you can get past the tough-to-get-a-handle-on controls, you'll find a very good action-adventure game that is worth a look by all Dreamcast owners. Shinobi. A game that will definitely appeal to finesse-style gamers. Sega's classic is a game that you can eventually memorize well enough to make it through the entire game without so much as taking a hit. Mario Bros. I may be too young to be an Atari age gamer, but this VCS port, with its crude visuals, minimalistic sounds, and gameplay that is still fun and engaging to this day, would have been a must-buy for me had I owned a 2600 in its heyday, and is still worth a look for collectors. Aladdin. Though the Sega Genesis version gets all the glory, the Super Nintendo version of Aladdin is still a competent platformer in its own right. S.L.A.I, Steel Lancer Arena International. This sequel to the Xbox game Phantom Crash takes the customization of the Armored Core series and infuses it into a simulated online world with a tough degree of difficulty and over 50 hours of gameplay, making for a deep, rewarding, criminally underrated experience. Soldier of Fortune Payback. Though I understand the complaints of the series fans, and why the mainstream gaming media, with their high and lofty opinions so much higher than the rest of us mere mortals, hated it, taking it for what it is, an arcadey shooter more akin to GoldenEye than Call of Duty, you find a game that, despite its obvious flaws, I rather enjoyed playing. Lair. I understand the backlash over the forced 6-axis controls, but this Factor 5 developed game plays a lot like Rogue Leader with dragons at its core, and was quite frankly unfairly raped by the gaming media at the time.
Nice one, Ron.
The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. I remember the controversy over the art direction in Wind Waker, but its recreation of almost a childhood sense of adventure in the sailing, much deeper storyline, a world where every square on the map had something to explore, and superior dungeon designs, makes Wind Waker my favorite 3D Zelda of all time. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Hyperstone Heist. Considering this is the one I've owned since I was 9 years old, though not going without playing Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo at that time, it should be no surprise that I actually like Hyperstone Heist on the Genesis better than Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo, though I still love Turtles in Time. But in hindsight, owning both of them on their original systems, Mode 7 effects and slightly smaller sprites aside, Hyperstone actually controls and plays a little smoother overall. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Released as a beginner's RPG, Mystic Quest, though watered down in some areas, still has some RPG charm in it, and an amazing soundtrack, but I would suggest it as more of a curiosity than a serious Super Nintendo RPG. The Blob. This is one of those quirky and unique experiences that is surprisingly more addictive than it should be, considering the simple concept of playing as a blob who absorbs colors and colors a grayed out world. Omega Boost. To roughly paraphrase one Game FAQ's member, the Saturn had Panzer Dragoon, and the N64 had Star Fox 64 as their big blockbuster rail shooters. But Omega Boost is the closest the PS1 got to either of those two titles, and while I agree that Omega Boost isn't quite up there with those two, it is still a tough but really well made combination free flight and rail shooter that is worth a look. Oddwolrd, Munch's Oddysee. Oddworld inhabitants really did a bang-up job of not just seamlessly transitioning the interestingly humorous, dark, and odd world of the original games into 3D, but also transitioning the gameplay and puzzle-heavy focus, truly making it feel like Oddworld in 3D. Super Dodgeball. This tried and true NES classic not only set the formula for all dodgeball games to follow, but is still just as fun to play today as it was in the glory days of 8-bit gaming. Tekken 3. While I do not consider this game to be the absolute best 3D fighting game on the PS1, with its fairly deep fighting system and cool unlockable modes and characters, I do consider it to be one of the best.